Yeah, so I'm Hidde. It's I said hidden because 90% of the time I have to explain how to pronounce my name. I get Heidi, Hidde, Hedy. I get all the things except hidden until I say it's hidden without the N. But I think Jeroen fixed that for me because I'm rule from now. Um, like Jeroen said, before going into software development, I have spent thousands of hours designing apps and other digital products. Basically, in a nutshell, this is my career in one slide, I would say. Um, but obviously, at some point, I was done just drawing nice circles and rectangles. I also wanted to have something tangible. I always found it very magical if a developer turned my flashy design into something real, and I decided like, hey, I want to be able to do that too. How hard can it be, right? Famous last words, it's really hard. But in Dutch we say de aanhouder wint, which translates to persistence pays off, I guess. And over the last 5 years, I've been building products. Basically, as soon as Swift came along, I started to touch code a little bit more. I tried Objective-C a couple of times, but I was like, nope, that's not my cup of coffee. But I'm here to talk about watchOS. So like Jeroen said before we start, I have to correct one thing here. Do watchOS, more inclusive from my end. Just a quick preview. These are some of the products I built as an indie app developer. As you can see, there's a lot of watches in there. These are the names of them. This Fact is a weight tracking app. That's the one. This is actually not purple, by the way. That's the Beamer. As you can see, Fact is the one that started all. The health kit was introduced, and like putting in your weight was super cumbersome. There's like a plus and then another screen and then add data. So I was like, oh, that's a good way to learn at least to work with one API with health kit. And right after, I quickly added the watchOS version of it because I thought it was cool. Brush is a toothbrush timer for the Apple Watch. I used Brush to learn Swift UI. It was the first year that Swift UI was available and standalone watch apps were available for the Apple Watch. Also, toothbrushing was added to HealthKit, so I was like, yeah, let's get all the new things in one small app. Then last year I launched Now Playing, which is, well, to put it short, it's Shazam on steroids, I guess. It uses Shazam Kit, a music kit, to find a song, and then it looks at 5 or 6 different sources, sometimes even directly from the artist or label, to tell you the story about a song. So basically, if you remember those nice liner notes in the CDs or vinyl records, if you're old enough, I try to replace those in the digital era. And then Follow is the kite surfing one. Okay, enough about me. So before we start, I would like to see everyone with the hand up that has shipped an app for watchOS before. Not a lot of people, huh? And who's planning on building something for watchOS? All right, nice. I like that. It's a lot more than I thought. You killed one? Of course, that's hard. Yeah, so I hope that by the end of this talk, I convince at least one of you that is planning on, or the one of you that didn't raise any arms, to at least try to build a watchOS app. So let's have a look first at the state of watchOS today. Like, where are we today? It's been a couple of years since the first watch was launched, and that was not the prettiest sight for the developer experience, and we came a long way, so let's go. Currently, there's 100 million people wearing an Apple Watch actively, give or take. It's obviously not a round number like that. I saw quite a few of within that 100 million in this conference, so that's nice to see. But to point it out, that's still a lot of people. It's not iPhone market people, but still 100 million people is a lot of people. It's still growing year over year, and that's a really good thing because the more people wearing a watch, the bigger your impact can have with an Apple Watch app. So let's compare some things. Today, if you build a watch app for watchOS 9, there's only 7 devices and 5 different screen sizes you need to support. That sounds like a lot if you're coming from the early iPhone days, but if you compare it to the iPhone now, that's 22 devices and 10 different screen sizes, even with different pixels per inch as well. So it's a lot easier to test if they're quite similar. They're actually so similar that the difference between the smallest one, the 40 millimeters, and the Ultra, the big boy, is exactly one giraffe emoji. That's is quite some space, but not like massive difference. The API availability has grown a lot since watchOS 1. watchOS 1 was really not an app, it was more an extension on some other hardware. It was really a weird situation to be in. But currently, if you look at some of the APIs that are available today, like all the new ones often being added to watchOS directly, including Swift Charge, which next talk will tell you all about, I'm pretty sure. But basically, in one short note, all the cool kids are here. So why not? There's no reason anymore to like, yeah, but I want to do this cool thing that I can do on iPhone and it's not possible on watchOS. Well, unless it's something like really fancy and niche, I think you can pull off most things here. The next thing I'm going to say is, don't throw tomatoes at me. Some APIs are even better on watchOS than they are on iOS. Okay, that was it. I have a valid point for this, but there's one main reason for this, and that's this one. There are a lot of sensors in this tiny little device. These are actually the sensors that you can get in the latest watch models, with water submersion and water temperature being the fancy new ones. But also heart rate and blood oxygen are like unique to Apple Watch. So with APIs better on watchOS and iOS, I mainly refer to Core Motion and HealthKit. Especially HealthKit, of course, as most watch apps are health related still. It's also the main reason why most people buy an Apple Watch, to keep track of the health. But let's continue, because now we know what we're dealing with. Why I think building for watchOS is good practice as a developer in general. There's two main reasons to point out here. The first one comes a bit from the design background that I have as well, is that the size, the small screen size of an app, the limitations really, forces you to keep focus on doing one thing really well. I don't know if you remember, but in the early days of the iPhone, apps were presented as like little applications that do one thing really well for your phone. I think we lost control there somehow, and if we have features, we put them all in the same screen, and then the user will find all the buttons. That's how most apps work these days. But actually, watchOS apps still hold to that same truth. Like they should do one thing really well. Here's an example of things. Great to-do list app. I'm sure most of you know this. But this is a great view. Like the watchOS app for things only focuses on what to do today, while the phone and iPad version really is a full-fledged productivity app. The second point is that it's a great tool to learn new things. And by learning new things, I mean things like Swift UI. Whoa, fancy new. So most people, okay, this is maybe another question. Who here touched base with Swift UI the first time building a widget? Quite, yeah, exactly. It's a safe way, right? It's isolated from your main project. It only supports Swift UI, so you're kind of forced to. So this would be a nice widget for Daniel's cool little scooter tracking app. But if you think about it, building a watchOS app today is also being fully supported in the Swift UI lifecycle. And there's one benefit, actually. You could add buttons, you get interaction, and you can actually do some computing power. But if you put them side by side and remove the safety margins, they're almost the same size, really. So the same UI could potentially be used over and over. But then again, I think with watchOS, you have a bit more things to play with. So you really get to know SwiftUI in a bit better way to actually start building UIs in your iOS app version too. Not to mention only interactions, but also things like animations. This is an animation I did on my toothbrush timer. So after you finished brushing your teeth with like some old-fashioned toothbrush that doesn't buzz, you can opt in for another 30 seconds of mouthwash. So I thought the only cool way to show another timer instead of another circle that counts down is just to fill up the watch with water. These are exactly the things you can play around with in an isolated environment like watchOS, and not so much in a widget. So, with those two things in mind, how do you actually build and design great watchOS apps? Before we go into details, I just want to give one quick design tip from experience. One thing I always do when creating new flows, creating new screens, creating new apps even, is asking myself over and over, what is the main goal of this view/app? If you keep repeating this question to yourself continuously, you realize like, oh, I actually don't need this feature in this view. I could move it somewhere else. And therefore, you force focus again in your views. Focus is a very recurring thing here. I'm warning you already. Okay, then we go into little details. Some from the HIG, some like, oh, this is cool. Only use background color if there's a really good reason. Basically, it sums up to like, I only work in black, sometimes very dark gray. There are exceptions though. So every now and then, when I say good reason, is creating very immersive experience. Like the mindfulness app does a lot of cool things like that. With my now playing app for watchOS, I create this little immersive experience. Like, hey, we're looking now, and if it found an artwork, it shows like the fully flushed, like colorful thing. Only because you're in the moment and you want to know what's playing right now. Other than that, you didn't care. The next thing, again, recurring, keep focus. This generally is, I can't stress this enough. It's really, really important to keep focus. And with focus, I also mean interactions should take seconds, not minutes. It's not nice to spend minutes like this. I mean, try it. Your arm it's so tough. Then another one is don't treat it as a phone. Don't try it like, oh, I have this app on iOS that does this, and this. Maybe I should accommodate all those features in the Apple Watch app as well. Really think about, okay, what interactions within my app, what features in my app actually make sense to be glanceable and quick and on the go. Then this is another big one, complications. It's quite funny that one of the things that I learned is if you ship a watch app without complications, there will be users emailing you like, hey, can you add complications? Because I want to be able to open your app faster. I'm not sure, the most people here that have a watchOS app probably know how painful it is to find an app. Still today with the little beehive grid or the list, if you prefer that. So even if it really just opens your app, which is very easy to do, people will love them. They absolutely love complications. But since this year, actually, there's another benefit, because the lock screen widgets and the complications use the exact same API. Both use widgetkit. So I would dare to say that, or maybe inspire you to say, like, if you support lock screen widgets today, you could consider building an app for watchOS that just support that functionality. You can, in that case, you already have the complication ready because it's on lock screen, and you already have a focus to pull off in the actual watchOS app. Then there are some hardware things that are unique to the Apple Watch as well. One of them is the digital crown. I think above anything, the digital crown is a very smooth and nice way to let the user interact with your app. In this case, for follow, I added, there's a big, massive start button. My original idea was there's a big, massive start button, so you could do it with your nose, because kitesurfers in winter often wear like a full wet suit with gloves and everything, because it's really cold. But then I realized, wait a second, I have access to the digital crown. I can also let them just turn the crown and get started right away as well. And as you might know, if you spin the crown, the haptics feels so good. It's so nice. You all know what I mean. It's so the little ting, ting, ting. It's nice. And then this year we added, there's a new hardware thingy added, the action button for everyone with a big boy. The action button is an interesting first step from Apple to introduce like a new button to hardware. It's interesting because it's not just a single API that says, hey, the action button has been pressed. No, of course not. It's Apple. It has to be a bit difficult. It's built with app intents. So, has anyone here has experience with app intents? Do you love them or hate them? It's good, huh? It sounds a lot worse than it is, because app intents is a fantastic framework. There's actually 3 app intents directly connected to your action button. First of all, it's only a start workout intent that connects to the action button. So if you think of building something with the action button and it's not a workout, don't recommend it. Wait maybe for another year or so before when they added maybe more APIs. But for now, it's only supported for starting workouts. And then you have pause workout, resume workout. So you have to handle those intents. You get them for free. But for the ones that didn't have any experience with app intents, this is basically a full app intent in a slide. It's very, very straightforward. You only need the workout style, the type alias for the workout style, and then the basic title parameters. But the interesting thing is, as soon as you've started the workout with the action button, you can say what to do next with the action button. So as soon as you're in the actual workout, you can then say, okay, if the action button has been pressed another time, go crazy with this other intent that you've created. So for follow, it was obviously that I had to support this. I mean, it's also my only workout app really, so didn't have a choice. But still, I immediately thought like, oh, this is so nice, because if you're on the water, and even with gloves on, you can still press the button, and it would change UI. So I got started working on that directly, and so you press the button once, and then you get this nice little, well, I don't actually think it's that nice, but you get it for free, and you can't really stop it. But it does give a hint to the user using it for the first time to know what to expect when they press the button. So you can see here, if you press it again, sorry for the Dutch, then it will change layout, so they can have more jump-focused in UI or more speed-focused UI, because some more people are more like speed devils, others are more only about the jumps. Personally, for me, the button was a very welcome gift, because I actually, well, you saw 4 apps on watchOS, but I actually built like 8 or so. Some are cancelled, some didn't make the production, and so one of them is an internal tool for follow. I've built a tool that just collects data. So I have a few kitesurf friends, and I give them my Apple Watch, or use if they use their own if they have one. And the reason why I collect data is because I'm training a core ML model to recognize jumping patterns and later on crashing patterns. That's going to be a fun one to train, but we'll see. So the problem I always had is like, okay, you're on the water. Ideally, you have different CSV files for jumping and riding, so you can label them easier in machine learning. But how the hell do you switch when kitesurfing? So I tried doing it with the digital crown, but yeah, this movement while going fast is really hard to do. They managed to do it a couple of times, but in the end, I was getting just endless streams of the whole session, and I had to cut them up myself. a lot of work, and like I said, I'm quite lazy sometimes, so I don't like to do a lot of work. So with this button, I now can have the trainer app say, okay, I'm now gonna jump. They jump, they land, click the button, and so forth and so forth. That's where I get a lot of more cleaner data. Um, I do that for kite surfing, but of course, but you can do that with a lot of different things too. So for training data, for collecting machine learning data with core motion, it's fantastic because you don't need to get approval if you just use test flight as well. So, well, test flight approval, I guess, but that's rarely get rejected, I guess. Um, then another thing why building for watchOS actually helps you become a better developer for also for iOS is they have an always-on display for years now. So most Apple Watches these days, except for the SE, has an always-on display. And since this year, it's also on iOS. So it's already a good practice. Like iOS now, it's still like they lock your phone and you can't do anything. But who knows? The iPad might get it. You never know what's going to happen in the future. You can play around with what do you show when the always on kicks in and the app is not active anymore. So you can play around with it, and it's super easy to do because it's literally just one environmental value says is luminance reduced or not. That's literally all you get, and it's true or false. And if it's true, then the screen is off. It's very simple. Scene padding is also a big one. I mentioned that they recommend full black backgrounds. The reason for this is because it's really a good practice to try to get your watchOS app be as immersive as possible with the rest of the bezel. I guess the bezel right now is a bit different on the big ones, but the bezel also gets smaller, but they still try to make it as calm as possible because a lot of colors going on there is not everyone's taste, and for contrast reasons, it's also better practice. So scene padding is a Swift UI method that tells any label or view, like, okay, check the bezels of the device and make sure the padding is right to show in practice. You don't see a lot of difference between the regular padding and scene padding. However, the regular padding is just a fixed value, whereas scene padding is really depending on what device it's on. It's actually also available on iOS since a while now, I think. But it's a lot more relevant to watchOS because every single pixel counts. Because you do have that smaller screen, so you do need to find ways to make things, keep things legible with the rounded corners in a smaller screen is a lot harder than doing it on a longer screen. Yeah, so that makes it a bit more clear, I guess. Then we have one more, maybe two. One more big thing for building for watchOS is like, okay, I have a watchOS app, but I also have a phone app. How do I let those things communicate with each other? In the WWDC session from last year called There and Back Again, data transfer on Apple Watch, they have this nice little overview about what to use when. It's really a good session if you want to do more with data transfer between two devices. They really, I mean, this is as clear as it gets, I guess. But one of the key things here is persistence across platforms. watchOS does find whenever they think it's best to start syncing. All limitations on watchOS basically have to do with battery life. So you can't force a sync necessarily. Watch will check, okay, how's the battery? Am I connected to Wi-Fi, or do I have any good cellular signal? So it will find the optimum time to sync over data. So make sure that if you build a standalone watchOS app, that you actually use iCloud as well, or whatever you want to use, that make sure that if the user later on installs the iOS app, at least the data gets synced over and then they don't have to set up everything again. Since this year, which was not in this slide because they added it this year, you can't believe it, but it's true, is an SVS key value store. Yeah. Who named this? Like really, what? Why? But believe it or not, it's actually true. It's supported since iOS 5, but watchOS and tvOS 9. This is a great new tool because, well, probably most of you are familiar with analysis of key value store. Uh, it's a nice, easy way to sync up preferences to iCloud, and for watchOS, it's just really nice and easy because you don't have to overkill it with other iCloud things and stuff. But what if I want to sync up my data directly? I want to show data directly to my phone as soon as possible. Well, there's one main thing still from the old WatchKit days that's still very actively in use, and that's watch connectivity. Basically, watch connectivity, as you can see, this is my nice amateur hour video. As you can see, it like pops up, it shows up immediately on the phone as soon as it updates on the watch. Basically, what watch connectivity does is you can send a message to your device. Even if your app is not active, it will fetch on the background, and as soon as your app is active, it will empty the queue into your iOS. You just have to, you can handle it once. If you don't, it's gone. So do handle it. But it's very straightforward and very easy. You send a string and any to the other device. It goes vice versa, actually. And you can even set a reply handler, but in this case, it was not even needed. So this is all needed to send a data thingy to your other device. Then it's not all sunshine and butterflies. There's also some less fun stuff. Okay, it's not all great. Debugging can be painful. I think this is the experience most people have when building for watchOS. Like, yeah, but it's wireless, it takes forever, or it doesn't find my watch. I have to wait and wait, I have to restart my computer. Yes, this is painful. It gets better every year, but it's still sometimes can be very frustrating. I assume they will fix this over time, as like rumors also have that iPhones will lose their ports and stuff. So I'm pretty sure they're working hard to get the wireless debugging better and better. But that's magic that I don't understand. So yeah, Plan B really is the simulator is your friend. You can even emulate workouts and like cycle routes and whatever. So you can do quite a lot, except core motion stuff, of course, and some audio stuff. But most things are possible in the watchOS simulator. And actually quite new, what I quite like to do anyway, is which I started setting up like last weekend, like to do anyway, is use Cloud to keep getting test flight builds internal. So you just, whenever you build, you get a new test flight build internally, and then you can at least test it on device. You don't get the nice fancy debugging, but at least you can do a quick test if things work correctly as expected. Core data. We always have to mention core data here. It's a little slow sometimes. As I said before, limitations on watchOS. It has less computing power than your iPhone or iPad. So it has to handle resources a bit better and a bit smarter than your other devices. Also, not always necessarily connected to the internet. Yeah, in the end, it works. Sometimes you just get random people saying like, "Oh, my data doesn't get synced over," and then a few days you don't respond, and a few days later, never mind, it's synced now. So it's still a miracle on when it exactly syncs, and it's hard to tell. But if you're actually working on a watchOS app and you realize like, "Hey, I never get any of my core data synced over," they might have fixed it now because I haven't tested that recently. You use automatically generated core data classes. Somehow, I'm assuming this is a bug, but somehow automatically generated core data classes don't show up as fast or don't show up at all on between watchOS and iOS. So you have to switch to the manual model classes. The last painful bit, I would say, is if you build a watchOS app and you ship it to the App Store, and it's only a watchOS app, there's this one thing that You can install it from the iPhone, buy it from the iPhone, but as soon as you switch devices and you go back to the App Store, you get a nice blocked, disabled, purchased button. So you get users asking, hey, I bought this app, but I can't install it anymore on my watch. What's happening? The solution for this is sending them to the App Store on watchOS and let them download from there, which is a quite painful, and I hope they fix it soon. But it's good to know. It's like a gotcha thing. My very last point I want to give, this is the most important one, I think. Have fun. Really just have fun building whatever you think is fun to build. Don't feel ruled out by too much constraints. Just experiment and try. And you might actually learn a thing or two which you can actually use on your iPhone app as well. So you can, yeah, you know this deal. Thank you very much, and tot ziens.
So does anybody have any questions?
There you go.
Let's start in the back there. Bart, can you run it up?
Who was the question?
Thanks so much. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, so you mentioned that you are very happy with the Apple Watch Ultra, the big boy, the new button.
Yeah.
I was curious if you worked with the accessibility features of the Apple Watch, because you can clench your fist or...
Good question. I have tested it out. A lot of those things, in my case at least, I tested my apps. A lot of the functionalities happen to work out of the box. I'm not sure if I did anything right or anything wrong, but for me, that's my experience so far. So if you use just the normal SwiftUI structures and some of the accessibility labels, a lot of this clinching stuff feels like Minority Report, really, if you try it, but it works.
Yeah, I meant more from a developer perspective, because you were happy about the new button, but if you have those accessibility functions, those are also can be combined with the hardware to have more input options.
Not really. I think you can't just opt. I mean, I would not advise to just keep it as like an extra functionality because you can do this, because it's very hard in discoverability-wise. You just have to set things up in the settings and stuff. You don't ever want to ask your users to go into any settings, really. So I mean, it's an alternative to hardware buttons for a reason, right? So I would always try to respect that.
All right, thank you.
Hi, great presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
My alley. I'm glad that you mentioned one of the pain points, and that's debugging. I agree with that. Other pain point as a user I wanted to ask you is, what is the refresh rate or the throttling for complications? Because, for example, my steps counter application doesn't refresh as often as I want it to. So if you develop a complication, what are the limitations?
Yeah, so with the old complications, what I did is refresh the complications whenever needed, but with the new ones, it's all widget kit, so it's all based on the timeline you give it. Yeah. So it's still sometimes a bit voodoo time machine, maybe it's Ben's time machine, I don't know. But it's hard to really plan, but yeah, that's all I can say. The refresh rate, you don't have full control on it.
Okay, yeah. So basically, you cannot plan it when to.
No, it's literally the same now as widget kits.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's similar. Okay, thanks.
Hi. So I have a question about, from a perspective of developers that don't build Apple Watch apps. I very rarely build on my personal device, which is connected to an Apple Watch, and I get this Xcode, like preparing Apple Watch for debugging or whatever takes like so long. What's up with that?
You just get an Apple Watch. No, I don't. Yeah, honestly, I don't know. That's. I think I haven't seen that bug actually in the latest Xcode, but maybe that's also because I always do have an Apple Watch connected. So yeah, sorry, I guess.
Yeah, if anyone knows, I'm really curious. Later, I mean, of course. Thanks.
Does anyone else have a question here in the front?
I think you were faster, Jeroen.
I know.
I'm like, I didn't have a question. I just wanted the box. No, I'm kidding. Thank you. That was a really good talk.
Thanks.
How essential do you think it is to have a phone, like an iOS companion app, to market your Apple Watch app?
Very good question. If it's only for this already, it's very valuable, I would say. Also, the discoverability of watchOS apps in the App Store today is not as much and as big as I would like to see. But I think the gist of my talk is that it's generally a really good platform to experiment on. And yeah, so if you feel like going crazy and build a companion app with it, I highly recommend it, because it's also good practice to check the syncing. So yeah, it's not mandatory, but for marketing reasons, for discoverability, I would really suggest doing it. Yeah.
Well, thank you. First of all, you seem like a nice guy, and seem you have a lot of applications in productions. You gotta be doing a lot of unit testing. So I'm just curious. What's your
Yeah, true. I do a unit test. Yeah. I prefer user testing over unit testing, because the users don't look at code.
Thank you.
Okay.
This is you, Antoine, isn't it?
So does anybody else have a question? Otherwise, we're going to switch the laptop of Betty in place and then get the last talk going. So thank you, Hidde, for your talk, and it was great.